Cronkite News starts now.
Good evening and welcome to Cronkite News on Arizona PBS. I'm Amna Sapan. Thank you for joining us. There is believed to be only one remaining jaguar in the wild in the United States, and he roams in Arizona. But Sombra, as scientists call him, faces many barriers, including habitat fragmentation caused by development projects and the Arizona-Mexico border wall, which keeps him from connecting with this species. A group of filmmakers from ASU takes us to Sombra's home range in the Chiricahua Mountains to give us a glimpse of the last remaining jaguar.
A jaguar is roaming southern Arizona.
It is the only known jaguar in the wild in the United States.
The last sighting of this jaguar was on January 6th near the Chiricahua Mountains.
The last jaguar in the United States calls this mountain range right here that we're in right now its home. So we lovingly refer to this cat as Sombra. For at least 3 years, he's called Arizona home.
Most people think of jaguars as only living in tropical jungles in other countries. There were jaguars that once roamed throughout the U.S., and they were found throughout Arizona and New Mexico, probably all the way to the East Coast.
As people came west, we wanted to tame the West. We brought with us cattle, and cattle really were the demise of jaguars.
They disappeared because they were shot, trapped, poisoned.
These were, for the most part, government-funded programs.
Back before the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service became the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, we were a different agency. We were also responsible for getting rid of predators on the landscape.
People believed in the 70s and the 80s that jaguars were effectively gone from the United States.
Then in 1996, 2 males were detected. Suddenly we knew we had jaguars in the U.S. again, including this one that currently lives here in the Chiricahua Mountains.
So this is really, really exciting. We have a large cat scat or poop. This has a high probability of being jaguar. I'm not able to tell in the field. This one has hair. That hair looks like it could be a jaguar hair. A few meters away, we have a verified jaguar kill from several months ago. The jaguar actually sat here and sharpened its claws. Any forensic remains from a jaguar kill, whether that's scat or a kill site, is incredibly rare. And we're talking about fewer than 100 ever documented cases probably in the United States total.
Jaguar's a top predator. Top predators are known to do a lot of regulation for the species that are lower down in the food web.
Whereas, for example, if you remove the top predator and nothing is eating the animals anymore, then you get this what's called an explosion of some species. So then you get all of a sudden there's just deer everywhere, and the deer then start eating the plants, and then these plants that would have normally formed the forest in 100 years are now not forming the forest anymore. And what we've seen is it also promotes invasive species, because invasive species can often get a grip on ecosystems that are sort of collapsing.
This is a white-tailed deer that was killed. Every morsel of meat has been consumed, by that cat and then also by scavengers that came across it. And I think it just helps to demonstrate how important these apex predators are, because there's a lot of other species that are relying on getting a nice meal. Jaguars, they're not a threat to people. If we had populations of jaguars in the United States, the conflict with ranchers would be, almost zero. I mean, there's just so much prey here.
There's an abundance of white-tailed deer. There's many times more white-tailed deer than there was in the 1950s.
Jaguars travel to Arizona from Mexico. There's a larger population in the Northern Jaguar Reserve, which is in Sonora, Mexico. Every jaguar that we've seen in Arizona has been a male, and the unique thing about males is that they disperse.
When they're young and they don't have a territory yet, they go, I got to head out and find a great place to settle down, find a female or two, and have cubs. Well, unfortunately, they come up here, and of course, there's no females.
They have this incredible journey, and they pass through highways and farmlands and ranchers that are trying to kill them, and they finally get here, and then they hit this wall.
Here at the Guadalupe Canyon area, we're in the Palancillo mountain range. This is the best habitat for jaguars. And what you're looking at is the final terminus of the wall. I would say some domestic house cats couldn't get through that.
This wall is pretty impenetrable. It's totally impenetrable, and it's definitely separating wildlife from suitable habitat, and it's killing wildlife.
If you fragment populations by putting, let's say, a border wall between, you increase the probability of extinction for both of those separate populations.
I guess I would just say it's 30 feet of hatred and fear. It stands for nothing but all the wrong things.
So we think the answer is going to be that they'll have to be, in wildlife biology we call it translocated.
Some ranchers that are members of the Jaguar Project had said, why don't you just get one of these females? We've got some extra females here, and take her to the United States. I said, well, we can't do that.
Unfortunately, it's illegal. So it's illegal for scientific organizations to go and do this. It has to be done by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
It's really expensive and involves a lot of time and effort and funding.
To provide animals for reintroduction to the U.S., those Mexican populations would have to be rock solid safe. And right now they're not.
There are female jaguars on ranch lands in Sonora being killed right now. If we just incentivized trapping a few of those cats that are going to be killed and bringing them up here just to get the population going, in 24 hours we could recover this species.
Hey, we haven't lost jaguars forever in the U.S. It just takes the will, the political will, and some investment to bring back this noble creature.
If anything, working with jaguars for 21 years now has taught me is that they belong here, they've always been here, and that we need them back here.
And now, a look back at some of our top stories concerning Arizona wildlife and some super cute surf dogs.
Each winter, the Salt River Project utility company lowers the water levels along the Salt River in order to provide water and energy to more than 2 million Arizonans. But regulating the water levels has impact along the river. Megan Newsham shows us how wildlife, specifically the wild horses, handle these changes in flow.
About 440 wild horses depend on this river to hydrate, to play, and above all, eat.
You know, we're so close to the metropolis of Phoenix, right? Where you can see wildlife. There are so many recreational activities, and above all, people come here to see these beautiful, wild, free-roaming Salt River horses.
Salt River Wild Horse Management Group is an Arizona-based nonprofit dedicated to managing and protecting the horses that roam this area of the state. And protecting the horses also means protecting their food supply, specifically the eelgrass.
It's just really breaks our heart when we see them lose this resource that they really need for their survival.
However, nature is no longer in charge of the Salt River. Its levels are controlled by SRP, the Salt River Project Utility Company.
SRP is a power and water provider for the valley, and on the water side we serve over 2 million customers.
SRP controls the levels of the river by using a dam to release a certain amount of water. The difference between the water levels in summer and winter months is extreme, going from 800 to 1,500 cubic feet per second during summer months to sometimes less than 8 cubic feet per second in the winter. To better understand the difference in the water levels, last week the Salt River behind me was at 800 cubic square feet, which would mean that the water level was about up to my knees, and now it looks like this.
And when they shut it off, it kills the eelgrass, which the horses depend on.
David Stallings is a volunteer for the Wild Horse Management Group and says for the past 3 years they have tried to stop the Salt River Project from lowering the levels below 100 cubic feet per second.
We're not asking to keep it at 800, 900 CFS because that would be unreasonable, would cost them a lot of money and too much effort, and they have customers and stakeholders. But 100 CFS is about 10% of what they keep it in the summer, and at 100 CFS we could keep most of that eelgrass alive.
Salt River Project says this request is not as simple as it sounds.
So the request to increase those fall releases from 8 CFS to 100 CFS out from Stewart Mountain Dam actually puts about 9 billion gallons of water at risk every year that operation is continued.
And Skarupa says saving this amount of water every year is crucial because of historic droughts. However, the Salt River Wild Horse Management Group believes keeping the water levels higher helps the entire ecosystem, not just the horses.
Tadpoles that are salamanders and frogs and all kinds of rare reptiles and fish here in the lower Salt River. So we could preserve that life and the eelgrass for all of the ecosystem.
The challenge will be dividing this resource with humans and horses for years to come. In Phoenix, Megan Newsham, Cronkite News.
The Wild Horse Management Group was unable to come up with a settlement between SRP. The water levels will be lowered again this winter. This means the rescue group will have to begin their feed program. To find out more information, or if you would like to donate, go to saltrivermanagementgroup.org.
There's around 3,000 water catchments throughout the state of Arizona in various states of repair. Reporter Balin Overstolz-McNair visited a site near Flagstaff to show us how they are used.
These man-made water supplies for wildlife were first built in the 1940s and originally for quail, but now they serve all wildlife. The Arizona Game and Fish Department is redeveloping the Middle Trick tank near Walnut Canyon as the need for water increases. They're installing a new system that could sustain itself for up to 50 years.
We have had a couple years here and there where we've gotten good winter rains or we've gotten good summer rains, but by and large, over the last 20-some years, putting together several good years of what we consider to be normal precipitation, they just don't seem to exist so much anymore.
Ed Jarkey, who manages water projects, says it's hard to know exactly how effective water catchments are because there are so many dating back roughly 80 years. But the animals do use them.
The site behind me, we've already had a herd of elk come into this, but without a doubt, they're usually in here. As soon as the trucks pull out, animals start to explore it. So.
Right now, contractors are hurrying to finish the Little Trick tank, which will drain water into here, where animals will be able to access drinking water during the hot summer months, but also throughout the year. These tanks are actually able to self-sustain themselves with rainwater if there's enough during the year. Arizona Game and Fish does not receive state tax money for these projects, and they have to create their own funding. They also rely on volunteers like Tom Mackin, who has been working on projects for 35 years.
Well, for me, it's the personal satisfaction of knowing that I've made a small difference in my little corner of the Region 2 for Game and Fish.
Mackin says it's not easy work to help protect wildlife.
You talk about carrying capacity for wildlife, you're talking about food, water, shelter, and space. And without any one of those, the space and everything else is for naught. It has to be all in balance.
Volunteers have been maintaining water catchments since 2008. If you're interested in the Adopt a Catchment program, just know that there is a certification process and the work does require specific skills. In the studio, Balin Overstolz-McNair, Cronkite News.
Arizona summers bring not only the heat, but also wildfires, kitten season, and monsoon season. Even though it's getting cooler out, some shelters are still seeing an overflow of animals. Cronkite News reporter Nicole Long visited local shelters to see how monsoons have impacted their capacities.
We definitely have had a lot of capacity issues, and it's just a whole conglomerate of all of these different things just coming together.
These storms bring the possibility of pets escaping homes in panic. Here in Maricopa County, officers like Stephanie Gallego spend their day responding to calls all across the valley.
During monsoons, people fail to rectify their fencing, so there's fences that are already lacking security.
Monsoon season lasts from June through September, and during these months in 2020 alone, about 6,500 dogs were brought into the shelter, according to Maricopa County Care and Control.
The summertime is probably busier for us. I know it sounds contradicting. There's more people out and about, so there's more opportunities for an encounter with a dog and a human.
Building a positive relationship between your animal's behavior and loud storms, along with maintaining a secure home, are just a couple ways to keep your pet safe during monsoon season. In Phoenix, Nicole Long, Cronkite News.
The creosote bush is the most common shrub in the desert areas of the Southwest. And it is more than just drought tolerant. Cronkite News reporter Nicole Long has more on why this plant is unique.
You can spot this plant on the side of the road. But it's more than just a regular shrub.
One of the things that makes them of interest for medicinal use is also one of their desert adaptations. They produce a really thick, waxy, and oily surface on their leaves. There's a couple different compounds that are really unique.
Here at Desert Sage Herbs, those waxy leaves are infused into teas and salves that can treat up to 50 different illnesses.
So internally, it's used more for a lot of acute situations, like maybe infections, as a detoxifier, a cleanser, even detoxify like something like if you had a scorpion bite.
As a registered herbalist, Sonar is familiar with the plant and personally uses it to treat cuts and scrapes.
Kind of like how maybe more mainstream would use more of a neosporin or something like that. Like in our household, we use salves of creosote.
Although this plant may seem exciting to try out, it's important to use caution and talk to a specialist before ingesting it. In Phoenix, Nicole Long, Cronkite News.
The creosote bush can be highly toxic to people with kidney and liver issues. Always consult a health specialist before trying any new treatments.
Surf's up. California's best surfing dogs flocked to Huntington Beach for some doggone fun over the weekend. Cronkite News reporter Jude Binkley takes us to the event.
The dog days of summer aren't over yet. Canines came to Huntington Beach to compete for barking rights in Surf City Surf Dog. The competition shared the beach with the U.S. Open of Surfing. Dog breeds of all sizes came to hang 20 in this unique sport.
I don't have to put him on there. He's a 100-pound dog, so he gets on if he wants to, and he just jumps right on.
Speaking of which, here we go right now.
He's barking, yelling the whole way out until he gets on the board.
Today's competition was divided into several categories based on dog size, tandem surfers, and dog-human pairs. Now, while there were winners in today's events, what mattered most for the competitors were the smiles on everyone's faces.
You look here today, everybody on this beach is smiling. And it's because we all love the dogs. And the dogs will do anything for us. You know, they're just out here, they're having a great time.
Over its 11-year history, more than 500 surfers have participated in the event. From Faith the surfing pit bull, to Derby the golden doodle, to Guinness the English bulldog, dogs of all sizes hit the waves. Known as Surf City USA, Huntington Beach frequently hosts pro competitions. Even if the pups don't have a good ride, they're here to have fun. And for their owners, it's a chance to strengthen their bond with man's best friend. In Huntington Beach, Jude Binkley, Cronkite News.
Surf City Surf Dog also showcased pet adoptions and raised money for several animal rescue charities.
That's it for Cronkite News tonight. Thanks for joining us. Break It Down is next. For top Arizona stories anytime, go to cronkitenews.azpbs.org.
Break It Down is brought to you in part by Mayo Clinic and viewers like you.
Thank you for joining us. Today I'm joined by former journalist and talk show host Preston Westmoreland, and we're going to break it down on unidentified flying objects known to many as UFOs. Preston, let's just jump right into this. Why do you think people are so fascinated with UFOs?
Yeah, I think more people believe in UFOs than Social Security, I read somewhere. I think people are fascinated by it You have the Area 51 stories that broke years ago, and the Roswell, and Arizona's actually been a real hotspot for UFO reports over the years. We have, of course, the Phoenix Lights. We have some stories that people may not be aware of. In the book Above Top Secret, there was a purported Cave Creek UFO crash. J. Allen Hynek, who led the Air Force's Blue Book project investigating UFO phenomenon, moved his whole operation out here, the Center for UFO Studies. And I asked him in studio, I said, why did you come to Arizona? He said, because there are more cases here than anywhere in the world. There's a case out where a bunch of scientists and Dr. Stephen Greer took over a ghost town out near Aguila and tried to contact UFOs. Most people don't know about these stories at all, but it's just been an underlying theme for many, many years. And everybody's always fascinated with the unknown, especially with UFOs. And in light of this report that's coming up as well.
You've extensively covered UFOs for the last, over your 25-year career, and I understand that you've built a relationship with former Arizona Senator Barry Goldwater, who says he has had some experiences with UFOs. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, I've interviewed the senator a number of times, and he sat right in front of me, and I said, Senator, I'm going to ask you about the Wright-Patterson question. He knew right away what that was. And I said, there were rumors going around years ago that they had crash wreckage from Roswell in a hangar at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio. And I said, did you try and get into that hangar to see the wreckage? And he said, well, I did. He said, but Curtis LeMay, who was later the head of the Strategic Air Command, was the head of the operation. And Goldwater told me that Curtis LeMay cussed him out and swore, was very abusive to him, and said point blank, you don't get in there because it's a need to know basis and you don't need to know. Don't ever ask me that again. And then Barry told me, he said, I always thought because he protested so much, there must have been something in there. If it was empty, why not say, yeah, go ahead in, open the door. And yeah, go ahead.
I think part of the fascination for me has been the response, not only from myself, but from, the military. I think so many of us everyday Americans look to ask exactly what is this? And the military is tasked with studying what are these flying objects that people may not have, a perfectly reasonable explanation for. And a part of this whole thing has been the military response. A lot of people say, it was a weather balloon or it was a military training. And I think that's just so fascinating.
Well, let me tell you something. I was flown out to the Carl Vinson aircraft carrier, 100 miles off San Diego. Actually did a show on the weekend there. And that's the area where these Navy pilots have spotted these craft coming out of the water and going into the water and that kind of thing. And when you see these military pilots come down, there's 5,000 people on an aircraft carrier, but you can tell the pilot because they have a swagger. I mean, they're very confident. And these young kids who fly $40 million jets, I believe if they see something coming out of the water, I believe them completely. I had the pleasure of going on a submarine ride for the military underwater, and I was interviewing the captain. This is on the East Coast. And I said to him in the middle of the interview, say, I've heard that there are UFOs reported underwater going 5,000 miles an hour. Have you ever heard of that? And he just clammed up. He pursed his lips and he said, well, what's the next question? And I always thought that to be very odd. Only to read recently that submarines have been dispatched in the Pacific to investigate some of these reports of UFOs going into the water. So it's go ahead.
Carl Sagan once said that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. For the skeptics out there who, don't really believe in UFOs, who need more evidence, do you think that there's still room for them to be fascinated by this topic? And what would you say to them?
Well, I mean, their evidence would be probably a crash wreckage, and we don't know where that is, whether it's on Area 51. Somebody told me they'd taken it to Australia, but, somebody told me years ago that there was a crash in Cave Creek, Arizona, right after Roswell. And it's in the book Above Top Secret by a guy named Timothy Good. Somebody said that book now is $1,000 on Amazon. It's very hard to get. But in the book, he talks about a crash near Carefree Highway, and supposedly they put a landfill on top. The Cave Creek landfill was put on top of the crash site. Some of the wreckage and the dirt with the wreckage was taken to Dreamy Draw Dam when they built the dam. and Cave Creek Road was banned to avoid it. And so I told a Phoenix City councilwoman this. She went down to the records division for the city, and she said, you know, there's no records of any of this around anywhere. And she always thought that was very interesting. But some guys had watched that crash being recovered from an old mine called the Gojon Mine, which is north of the Carefree Highway. And there was a guy there, just like in Roswell, who was asked to put some small bodies in a freezer and the whole thing. But it's in the book. There's a whole chapter on that. And you look at the Phoenix Lights, which is one of the most perplexing of all the UFO sightings. Reader's Digest years ago said it was the Canadian snowbirds flying in for the Phoenix air races. I was at the air races, and that had nothing to do with it at all. But nobody's been able to come up with a real a conclusive report of what those were, seen by many, many talented observers like airline pilots.
That is such a great example, and it's known worldwide. So many people know about the Phoenix Lights for that exact reason. Preston, thank you so much for your insight and for breaking it down on UFOs.
Happy to help out. Keep your eyes on the sky.
This hour of local news is made possible by contributions from the Friends of PBS, members of your PBS station. Thank you. If you have comments about Arizona PBS News, please contact us at one of the addresses on your screen. Thank you.